To just say a few words about Dr. Luchins, as he does not want me to say a lot of words. The first thing I will say is to please, as my husband indicated, would you please make sure your phones are on vibrate or without noise. So Dr. David Luchins has been chair of the Political Science Department at Touro University since 1978. He was also the founding dean of Touro's Lander College for Women. So that's it, Dr. Luchins.
In the context of tonight, I've been on the board of the Orthodox Union since 1970. The OU sponsors the center, and the OU has some very clear views on tonight's subject. Often I discuss a topic, I say the OU has no issues or position. Tonight we do. I even have a handout that the OU just put out this weekend. Do we have enough copies here?
20.
We have more than 20 people here.
I'll get one.
People can share, people can share. Some people not want to read it.
Do you have? No.
Yeah.
Do you want me to hand it out, or is that your notes?
It's not my notes. It's a report from Nathan Diamond of the Orthodox Union, a meeting of the United Nations on Thursday about anti-Semitism. Just a handout. So now central to what I have to say.
Just put two on each table.
Oh, that's fine.
And again, at the end, we'll see who has not been married yet. Oscar Wilde once visited Niagara Falls. He got out for a few minutes and said, wouldn't it be so much more impressive if it flowed the other way every so often? I'm not going to try to speak too long. I'll try to cut it down to less than 2 hours. So we can flow the other way and have questions. Seriously, I'll try this in 40 minutes, even though it lends itself to a much longer presentation. The Pesach Seder, we have the Makot, the 10 Makot. Then we have the Simanim. Yehuda Haritam Natam Ben Simanim. Yehuda gives us shortcuts, remember the Makot. Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, the great Rosh Yeshiva Chaim Berlin, blessed memory, says what's going on here. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, the Gemara tells us, it was by decree of the Romans, Rosh Midar Barim Bekol Makom, which can be translated as the first speaker or the keynote speaker. You're to be a speaker on an important topic to the Rav Hutner, don't throw 10 topics to the people. Cut it down to 3. That's why he made Siman. You're teaching us a lesson in speech giving. You know, the point of the Seder, things are getting a little late, and you're saying, hey. So I have 3 topics tonight. Topic question 1. Are things in America heading in the direction of Europe in the 30s? No. Then are they heading, they're not even heading to the place of America in the 30s. They're infinitely better. Question 2. If so, why are things bad? The answer is things are bad and getting worse. But it's not the 30s, different type of worse, different type of bad. And 3 is what can we do about it? Fair enough? Okay, now you've got your topics, we're going to take questions. Okay, fine. As they said, that has been called the world's oldest hatred. The world's oldest hatred. The Egyptians wouldn't sit in the same room with the Jews. They were a to'eva to them. When Yaakov dies, they mourn for 70 days. Oh my, this wonderful noble Jew is dead. When he's alive, they wouldn't eat in the same room with him. The world's oldest hatred. Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik says is a perverse form of flattery. They expect more from us, and they should, and they must. God forbid the day will come when they can't expect more from us. Then we'll lose our right in claim to Birkat Yaakov, which is linked with Birkat Esav. But Aaron points out the first and only treaty in the entire Torah between Jews and non-Jews living in Chutz La'aretz is at the end of Parshat Vayetzei. Yaakov makes a covenant with Lavan. Lavan is chasing Yaakov. Lavan wants to kill Yaakov. God comes to Lavan and says, don't you mess with Jacob. Okay? And they have a conversation, they have the argument over the Trophim, and Yaakov says a few words, and then they make a brit, make a covenant. Yaakov puts up a little rock. The little rock is a symbol of the covenant. To a Jew, symbolic restraint is all you need. Hedge of roses. You don't need a lock on the refrigerator to stop my Yekisha grandsons-in-law after 2 hours and 10 minutes going to have milk after flakes. You don't need a stone wall to keep us from carrying on the Sabbath. Those who carry on the Sabbath, Alechi and Eruv, is sufficient, right? Symbolism is the heart of Judaism. Rav Aaron Soloveitchik said 85% of Judaism is self-control, the other 15% is explaining it. So get self-control. Love doesn't understand self-control. I can kick that little rock into the next county. Then Yaakov puts a big pile of rocks in which to have a Sudah. Ooh, and Yaakov, ooh, says love, big pile of rocks. Brute force, I got it. When you're stronger than me, I won't mess with you, Jacob. And then Lavan has pardoned the mixed theological metaphor, an epiphany. Look at the words of the Chumash, it's fascinating. Lavan says, Yaakov, that little rock, that big rock, that big pile of rocks, is a sign that I will not attack you. And that big pile of rocks and that little rock are a sign that you won't betray me. Because you see, cousin, my son-in-law Jacob, I'm going to hold you to your standards. I'm going to call them Christian ethics. And when you don't follow your own standards, I'm going to beat your brains out. It's a double standard, sure it is. It's right there in the Torah, Parsha Yetzeh. Would you mind at this point a fantastic 2-minute aside, totally unrelated to the speech, but a great story. Great story, right? Great story? I heard this from Chaim Alevi Herzog, the president of Israel, son of the chief rabbi, and son of your father, your current president. It was November 27, 1947. Shabbat afternoon, Parshat Vayetzeh. The only parsha in which there's a conflict between Jews and non-Jews, Chutz La'aretz, which the United Nations General Assembly met to discuss the fate of the Palestine Mandate. It was supposed to be a close vote. It wasn't. And as Shabbat ended, Haftarah was completed, a joyous crowd rushed into the home of his father, the Rav Rashi, in Tel Aviv. Kvoda Rav Rashi, we won the vote! I know, said Rav Yitzchak Alevi Herzog. It was 33-13. Rav had his radio on Shabbat. He says, no, it wasn't the Parsha this morning. Yaakov calls it Galeid. 33-8 for Yaakov. Lavan calls it, about the only Aramaic in the whole Torah, Yigar Sidatuta, look at Oculus, Yud Gimel Rishatuta, 13 Rishon will be against Yaakov. That was just a little side, keep story. I heard it from the President of the State of Israel, with Senator Moynihan, I worked for 20 wonderful years, and Senator Moynihan, Chaim Herzog told the story, President Moynihan's Vivian, the English name was Vivian. Vivian, he says, and the Brazilian ambassador had to go to the bathroom, missed the vote. What would happen? He couldn't go to the bathroom, missed the vote. It's in the Bible already. Okay, back. So we count this. This goes way back. And as we must, we start with the Dvar Torah, and I just did from Rav Aaron. After the Holocaust, after World War II, Semitism became socially unacceptable in most of the Western world. And today it's crept back in from right and left into the mainstream from right and left. Make no mistake. The world is a horseshoe, and the hard right and the hard left, you'll see in a few minutes, drink from the same sewer. The problem is, if you live in the rabbit hole of the left, the right has problems. If you live in the rabbit hole of the right, the left has problems. Each side is very quick to point out the anti-Semites on the other side. And very rarely, and we'll give credit to some who do, are there people on one side who have the courage to denounce anti-Semitism on their side as well. So, we started with question one, this Europe in the 30s. Absolutely not. In Europe in the 30s, the government organized the anti-Semitism. In Europe in the 30s, the United League of Nations organized a meeting to discuss the, quote, Jewish problem. I'm the Dominican Republic, was the only country in the world willing to take Jews. Find a solution. Was inevitable. The United Nations had a meeting on Thursday night, which the OU was privileged to be part of. You have a brief report from Nate Zion, the Orthodox Union, It's not on the Jewish problem, on the Jew hatred problem. Many of you have friends and family in synagogues in America, grandchildren, children in schools in America. I've been speaking at seminaries all over Israel. I have done 9 seminaries, I think, so far. Each seminar I ask them, does your day school have guards? Does your day school have electronic system? And they all say, yep. Most of those are paid for by the states or the federal government. Since 2008, the federal government has given over $1.25 billion for the safety and security of houses of worship and schools. The program was started by George W. Bush, enhanced by Barack Obama, further enhanced by Donald Trump, and now doubled by Joe Biden. The only thing in the world all 4 of them agree on. Now, let me tell you about that program. Jews are, this is being videoed. We can't turn the video off, so I'm going to ask everyone here to use some discretion. The spy from the embassy, to be careful. We are privileged to have a representative here at the United States Embassy. If I say anything wrong, I'll end up in Guantanamo, but okay. It's okay. The deep breath. I'm going to do this as gently as I can. And I'm going to use my fingers instead of talking, and maybe we'll get out of the range of the video. Jews are 1.6% of the population of the United States. 1.6%. When I was a kid, it was 4%. In the 30s, it was 5%. Now it's 1.6%. That's bedeutend. That's a generous number. And Orthodox Jews are 1/10 of that. We're 1/6 of 1% of the United States. What percentage of that government money do you think goes to Jewish institutions, Jewish temples, synagogues, schools? Anyone have any idea? Over 50%. What percentage goes to Orthodox institutions? Deep breath, 44%. Who votes for this? Everybody votes for this. Congressman Omar and Marjorie Taylor Greene co-sponsor it. And they agree on this. Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz co-sponsor it. Folks, it's the most popular legislation in Washington. Everyone takes credit for it. I think it had like 90 Senate co-sponsors or something, and the program was created by the Orthodox Union. Call a vote to Nathan Diamond and his work, his extraordinary work building coalition partners on this issue. And so this is not Europe in the 30s. It's simply not. And we've had our first synagogue shooting in American history in the last 5 years. We had our second synagogue shooting. We've had several attempts to shoot up yeshivas and shuls. So what's going on? We'll get to that shortly. It's not America in the 30s. In America in the 30s, and my father was born in America before World War I. My mother's family came to live around the 20s. America was a very scary place. I have more details in a few minutes. But bear this in mind. We were 5% of the population. There were 3 Jewish congressmen. Today we are 1.6% of the population. There are about 27. There were no Jewish senators. Zippo, zippo, zippo. Today the Senate has 100 members. Between 8 and 10 are Jewish. 8 are Jewish, halachically Jewish to say they're Jewish. Dianne Feinstein of California is halachically challenged. All 3 of her husbands, not at the same time, and her father are Jewish. Her mom, alas, was not, and she's never converted. But she proudly calls herself Jewish, and she's on Ahmadiyya's list of Jewish senators. Seniority will get you, has some privileges. Senator William Bennett, who've never heard of Colorado, it's called now, but I never moved my father when I was a kid. Someone says they're an atheist, they're probably Jewish. Senator Bennett says he's an atheist. His mom was a Holocaust survivor. How did we find that out? He had to raise money for a post-election campaign this year. So then we all found out his mom was a Holocaust. And he's not George Sanders, it's really true. His mom was a Holocaust survivor. But he's an atheist. So 8 and 10 senators. Now bear this in mind. Barack Obama was the 4th black person ever elected to the U.S. Senate in history. The 4th. We're now up to 7. African Americans are 13% of the population, 7 senators in history. Jews currently have 8 and 10 senators. How about the cabinet? There was one cabinet, there was no Jew in the cabinet until the 20th century, when one was nominated by Theodore Roosevelt. Secretary of Commerce. There were 2 before 1950. The 4 highest cap positions in the United States by law: Secretary of State, Jewish; Secretary of Treasury, Jewish; Secretary of Defense, thank God, a black guy, not Jewish; Secretary of Secretary of Attorney General, Jewish; Homeland Security head, Jewish; Cybersecurity and Shekel, my student, Chani Newberger. Chani Newberger tells the following story. Who is Chani Newberger? Again, we're going to get to the bad news soon enough. You need the good news first. Listen to the Chani Newberger story. She spoke. We honored her with a well-deserved honorary doctorate. Chani Newberger left, graduated from Ventura College, went to Columbia for the new field of cybersecurity. Was hired by the Bush administration. When Bush left after 2 terms, she was retained and promoted by Obama. About 5% of people were. When Obama left after 2 terms, she was retained and promoted by Trump, even less were. When Trump, well, he didn't leave, but after 1 term, when Trump was replaced, when he went into it, she was promoted to cabinet level, head of national cybersecurity. Yeah, all 4 guys agree, and that's pretty amazing. She tells the following story. This is probably about Donald Trump. She said Trump was president. She told the story. She was not specific who the president was at the time. She said she turned on her hyper-secure laptop after Shabbat, and there's a raging firestorm. Where's Annie Newberger? Where do you need Annie Newberger? Where is Annie Newberger online? Then the big guy, see the Secretary of Defense, maybe the President of the United States. The big guy says, Annie is celebrating the Sabbath with her family. God bless her. She'll come on after the Sabbath and she'll solve our problem. She thought of her parents, concentration camp survivors. She thought of her parents in Auschwitz. She broke down and cried. So while I was crying, I solved the problem. What? Okay, folks, we have a lot of nachas. We have a lot to be happy about. We're in an extraordinary position. Let me give you a few more feel good before we get to the bad news sort of thing, you know? Here's some of the feel news, some of the feel good stuff, okay? Just give me a second, because I haven't used my notes for a while. I look at my notes now to see what I missed. Okay. Let's try this out. Almost half done. Almost done with the full page. Most Americans are our friends. Every poll shows the most respected minority group in America. Brenda Lawrence. Has anyone in this room heard of Brenda Lawrence? Except for my wife? Of course not. You haven't heard of her because Horace Greeley, the great newspaper reporter, editor, once said, Mr. Greeley goes on the front page of the newspaper. He said, if a dog bites a man, it's not news. When a man bites a dog, it's news. So the crazies, the noisemakers, you know their names. Brenda Lawrence has been a congresswoman for 10, just retired, for 12, 15 years. Black, progressive congresswoman who was chair of the bipartisan Black Jewish caucus in Congress. Outspoken friend of Israel and of our yeshivas. Super outspoken friend of our yeshivas. So Brenda Lawrence spoke at a Jewish conference with that. She said, most anti-Semitism in my community comes from ignorance and envy. Most racism in your community comes from fear and ignorance. She says, look, we can't work on the fear and the envy are hard to work on. Let's work on the ignorance and get to know each other. But most are our friends. Then why is it so bad? 1, because the crazies get the headlines, they get the attention, they get the news. 2, social media. Social media provides echo chambers, rabbit hole echo chambers, which reinforce the same message and reinforce it. So you believe everyone's talking that way. And let's get very, very brutal now. The crazy guy who stood in the corner cursing the Jews, people walked by, they walked around the block and didn't listen to him. Now he has 37 million followers on Twitter. He gets invited to dine with the President of the United States. You know, you heard of Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan is supposed to be the largest conservative social influencer. This past week he defended Congresswoman Omar. You know, remember the horseshoe? He said, what's wrong with saying Jews are obsessed with money? To say that Jews are not obsessed with money It's like saying that Italians are not obsessed with pizza. To which someone responded on a tweet and said, I am not aware of anyone killing a third of the Italian people claiming that one of the reasons they killed them was they're obsessed with pizza. Enough said. Social media is dangerous. Social media creates these extraordinary echo chambers where things are repeated and repeated, and stuff that used to be, we'll get to examples in a minute, that used to be totally in the sewers are now in the mainstream. We're going to give some very specific examples very soon. Ethan Felson, one of my favorite thinkers, Ethan Felson says, the further right you go in American politics, the more they love Israel and hate Jews. The further left you go in American politics, the more they love Jews and hate Israel. And I'm beginning to think it's more and more correct. And let's talk what's happened. In the left, let's talk about the left first. Let's talk about the left. Most of you are probably aware of the sins of the left. You may not be that aware of the sins of the right because of the echo chambers you may be living in. I must tell you, I find it's fascinating. My wife, we're here in Israel for the week. My wife went to the supermarket and decided to bring back the paper. She did me a favor, threw it back Haaretz. I tell you, I have no idea of the world. It's a whole different world I'm aware of. And that's because I live in a rabbit hole. My Israel is a rabbit hole. My vision of Israel is shaped from a perspective so different than theirs. They live here and I don't. They have the right to have that view, and I have no right to comment on it negatively. So I shan't, but it's a very different point of view. So let's talk about, on the left there, developing the college campuses, about 30 years ago, something called intersectionality. Show of hands, who's heard of intersectionality? Marcia, would you like to explain it to everyone? What? I didn't think so. By the way, this extreme view is now so in the mainstream that on the New York State mandated exam for everyone that works as a supervisor under the higher education. I had to take this exam and answer intersectionality questions. I think no. Excuse me. Anyway, here's intersectionality goes like this, and you got to hear it. Oppressed minority groups must stick together. They must all stick together. They have an obligation to protect and defend each other. To the point that if you don't support women's rights, then you're a homophobe. If you don't support the rights of disabled people, then you are a woman hater. If you don't support the rights of transgender people, then you are a racist. And on and on. I'm not making this up. It's real. Intersectionality is called. It's snuck from the far left into the mainstream. And now here's the funny part. There's only one nationality that has been included in the group of protected minorities. That's not Jews. It's Palestinians. And if you don't believe that from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, then you are a racist, you're a homophobe, you hate women, and you kick little puppies. And I can't overstate this. Now again, don't get me wrong. The Palestinians have a lot to complain about, especially the way they've been treated by the fellow Arabs through the years. From 1947, the United Nations partition, we talked about a moment ago, creating a Palestinian state, no one called Palestinian, then to 1969, to 1977. I can go on and on. I mean, working with Senator Moynihan for 20 years, I lived through a lot of this. But the fact of the matter remains is that if you indeed you object to the Chinese treatment of the Tibetans and the Uyghurs, and you boycott Myanmar over the rape and slaughter of 750,000 Rohingya Muslims, and you are very careful not to buy products made in most of the countries on the planet, then you have a right to also be objective about the Palestinians. But if the only ethnic group that makes the cut as a persecuted minority is the Palestinians, then I will quote the late, great John Lewis, civil rights giant from Atlanta, Georgia, who said, I believe on the floor of the House of Representatives, that if the only ethnic group on this planet whose persecution attracts your attention is the Palestinians, not because of who's being persecuted, because of who you can blame the persecution on, the Jews. And he said it's anti-Semitism. Flat out he said it. In a very dramatic speech, and every member of the Black Caucus except one voted with him to condemn BDS as anti-Semitic. When I asked the head of AIPAC,
Who was the one that did it?
what?
Who was the one that
I
did
don't
it?
have it memorized, I apologize. I once knew. When I asked the head of AIPAC, my head of AIPAC, what are you going to do about that vote on BDS? 37 congressmen voted the BDS is good. He said, after arrange 37 trips to Israel. We'll get to that later. That's the left's problem. And on the college campuses, they have spread. Don't kid yourself. It is increasingly vocal. And Jews are at the head of the parade. Jewish voices, Jewish parade. It's a real issue. Israel is an apartheid state. It's a racist state. And if you don't believe that, then you're a homophobe. If you don't believe that, then you're a racist state. Sectionality from the gutter to the mainstream. But how about the right? How about the rights problem? The rights problem, there was a man named Madison Grant. You can Google him after. I said, you can Google him, and some Basiaco principal said, no, they can't. I'm so sorry. What's my Google? You know? And then as I walk out, one of the girls says, we all have iPhones, don't worry. I started one of these girls' schools where they're not allowed to have these phones. And I made a crack, a comment. I get to the next school, I use it again. They go, oh, we heard that joke already. We'll get text messages about it. Okay, enough of this. I'll be very honest. If my grandchildren don't have computers, they sold them to the government. For base, I can never want them back. Okay. So let's continue. That's my sense joke, not mine. So let's continue. I thought I gave some problems. Okay. A man named Madison Grant, graduate of Columbia Law School, wrote a book called The Passing of the Great Race in 1914 or 15. In that book, Madison Grant argued that evolution among humans is ongoing. The apes evolved into the mud people, that's African Americans, into the Hispanics, into the Mediterranean people, into the Alpine people, Asians, and Mediterranean, Alpine, Nordic, and the master race, the Aryans, the Nordic Aryans. There's a mongrel race, the Jews. They're mongrels, but they have smarts. And they convince the world, you know, evolution, survival of the fittest, they convince the world to be kind and merciful, not to let the weak die, and they're taking over the world. How do they do it? They bring minority groups, inferior minority groups into the majority, into the white countries, to dilute their bloodstream and destroy their racial superiority. It's a nut job. President Woodrow Wilson fell in love with the book. And President Wilson made an executive decree, one of the darkest moments in contemporary American history, where he banned any African American for being in civil service over a white person. That was nothing. Madison Grant helped bipartisan support, Democrats and Republicans, write the Immigration Act in 1924 that barred Africans, Asians, Eastern Europeans, and Jews into this country. Virtually ended any chance of Jewish immigration, or go to the Holocaust, etc. Madison Grant got a love letter from a prison in Germany in 1923. I love your book. It is my new Bible. The guy's name is Adolf Hitler. It has been argued by people smarter than me that much of Mein Kampf is cribbed from Madison Grant's book. World War II so discredited Madison Grant, so discredited his theory, that kind of disappeared from the mainstream. A man named Camus, not the philosopher, not relative, in France, writes a book about, he's still alive, they don't want him down there, wrote a book called The Grand Replacement. The Grand Replacement argues, it started again. This is it. The final struggle between good and evil. Now you can't say Jew anymore, you can't say Jew after the Holocaust. You say Hias, Hadassah, George Soros. See a theme there? They're bringing in minority groups. Caravans to invade the United States. Boatloads infiltrate Europe. Destroy the white population. The fellow who shot up the shul in Pittsburgh, the first armed attack on the United States in our history, issued a manifesto quoting from Camus' book. The fellow who tried to shoot the shul in Conway, California, killed one person. Heroically was stopped. Quoted from that book. fellow shot 52 people in the Walmart in El Paso, Texas, who were killed on, and with live streaming no less, killed 40-some people in Christchurch, New Zealand, all quoted from Camus' book. Camus' biggest chassid in America, his name is Tucker Carlson. He's a very popular cable news fellow who constantly talks about replacement theory. Replacement theory. Whites are being replaced in this country. The Democrats are bringing in minority groups. Soros is paying for it. Hayek is paying for it. Haddad is paying for it. Nobody knows. Fascinating, isn't it? And this has stuck. So the far left's anti-Semitism in the guise of intersectionality, far right's anti-Semitism in the guise of great replacement theory, have both worked their way into the mainstream. Rav Aaron Soloveitchik comments on the Yaakov has wrestled all night with the sorrow shel Esav. And in the morning, Yaakov won't let go. He's wounded, he's hurt, he's wounded, he won't let go. Sarah Esav changes his name to Yisrael. Then Yaakov had the temerity to say, well, what is your name, sir? It doesn't matter. Says Rav Aaron, I can call myself a communist or a fascist. I call myself a Democrat or Republican, liberal, conservative. I would say MAGA, progressive. I go to anything I want to call myself. My main thing is I hate Jews. And I take whatever shape and form I need to do that. That's where we're at. And it's a real problem. What can we do? I have 3 pieces of advice and a very powerful closing remark from Yoshever Soloveitchik, which is really the most powerful advice I can give you. All these are going to be Meiser Rav. 1, if I came to you with a candy bar, and I said, this is a delicious candy bar. This candy bar has 27,000 followers on Facebook. This candy bar has 19,000 people who have endorsed it on Instagram. This candy bar has 7 major social media personalities who say it's terrific. You think about it, the candy bar without a struck on it, you want to know it's kosher, right? But why do we get up to look at use social media influencers? Why did we ignore you, Yehuda? I spoke to one audience, I will not tell you where, and I said, the camera girl said, I don't care about the OU and Yehuda, I don't care about the rabbis. I care about core Jewish values. Well, guess what, guys? Core Jewish values comes from our leadership. I find it fascinating. Well, now you get a candy bar without an OU. We'll ignore views. The OU will have some very dramatic examples of that. Well, just recently, when the election in New York State, what I'm trying to do is don't be played. Don't be played. We're being played right now. Because we're so popular, the left depicts any Republican candidate as an anti-Semite. The right depicts any Democrat as an anti-Semite. Most of the time, they're just wrong. We had a governor's race in New York. Many good reasons to vote for or against Kathy Hochul or Lee Zeldin. She was Israel, not one of them. Lee Zeldin was a Republican, the co-chairman of the Black Jewish Caucus. Worked very closely with the progressive Brenda Lawrence. Phenomenal record on Israel. And Kathy Hochul, extremely close with the Orthodox community, was Senator Moynihan, the last. She was on Senator Moynihan's staff. She was my colleague. She's an outspoken, strong, moderate voice. Both good choices. So what did it become? The left so smeared Zeldin as an anti-Semite that Brenda Lawrence, the black Democrats in Detroit, had to put out a statement and say, I don't live in New York. I live in New York, I wouldn't vote for Lee Zeldin. He's a conservative, very conservative, I am liberal. But don't you call him an anti-Semite. He's one of the few people in Congress, one of the few Republicans who will denounce Republican anti-Semites like I denounce Democratic anti-Semites. They got no press, no media. The dog by some members vote, no media, no one cared. It reached the point that the Agudas Israel had to arrange for the Satmar Rebbe and the Skira Rebbe. They don't never endorse publicly. Some Rebbe endorsed with a video. Yeah, right. You can imagine why. Endorsing Kathy Hochul. Because the noise on the right wing of the Orthodox community was so intense against Kathy Hochul, who was going to win, by the way, and did win. But it was so intense that in order to reassure her, the Orthodox Jews hadn't all left her camp, even though she had been a friend, a good friend, They got two leading Hasidic figures to publicly endorse her. Don't be played. Don't be played. Most of them are our friends. Most Americans are our friends. There were 10 primaries this year. Right back decided to get involved and oppose a person who was not a friend of our communities. Either Jews, Israel, in most cases both. One was a very conservative Republican who lost a seat. The other 9 were very liberal Democrats, and 7 of them lost, as they deserved to. My favorite race was the one in Maryland. A woman named Edwards had been a congresswoman for a number of years from the wealthiest African-American district in the country, Montgomery and Prince George counties, government workers and retired government workers, majority black district, and she abstained on any issue involving Israel. She was no friend of the Jewish community. So she had run for the Senate, lost, came back to run for the House again. The black community, black ministers put up an opponent to her. And they ran Facebook ads, I'm told, around the clock. They ran ads on Facebook and Instagram, cable television, with black ministers saying, we have to work with each other. We have to work with our brothers and sisters. Congresswoman Edwards, she was a congresswoman, did not support our friends and allies. Edwards lost 68 to 32. Now here's the punchline. The 2 races out of 10 where our friend lost. In one, I said, the district has been safe to Democrats since the Civil War in Oregon. The Republicans won the seat. You understand what I'm telling you? There's been Democratic over a century and a half, switched Republican because there were Democrats elected in a close race. And President Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama all endorsed the moderate Democrat, and the extreme left wing won. Bernie Sanders came in and campaigned for him. Pufo, probably won. 9 out of 10 ain't bad. There was a vote of funding Iron Dome. A vote on funding Iron Dome. Extra $1 billion for Iron Dome. Vote was 410 to 9. Does that sound close to you? Don't be played. Don't be played. Don't let people tell you the other side are anti-Semites. Chances are they're not. A story. What if they are an anti-Semite? A story. Illinois Senate race. It was 1994. Both sides went off the rails. Both sides nominated extraordinarily unusual candidates. In a 3-way race, a Democratic candidate, a woman named Carolyn Mosley Braun. She was ethically sketchy. She was morally challenged. She was a crook. So they went to jail. The Republican candidate was a Messiah named Fred Williamson, who famously said on Meet the Press, the reason we're on the wrong side of the Middle East conflict is there are too many damn Jews in New York. Nice guy. Okay, show of hands. Who votes for the anti-Semite? Who votes for the crook? Who votes for the anti-Semite? Who votes for the crook? Okay. And everyone else abstaining? I did this at one seminary, take over, and a girl said, I vote for the anti-Semite. I said, why? Because the crook is a Democrat's going to raise my taxes. It's lovely. So logical. Then I said, where are you going to school next year? Oh, I'm staying in Israel, making Aliyah. I'm going to come. The idea. Okay, have fun with Israeli politics, sister. That's all I'm going to say. Let's continue. So Laverne Soloveitchik has never been, since he voted for Roosevelt over Wilkie in 1940, he told me, until 2000, before he died, never publicly endorsed a candidate. He called a press conference with the rabbis in Chicago, and he publicly endorsed the crook. So later someone said to him, it was his grandson said, Sadie, he said, worried about Eretz Yisrael, he said, worried about Jews. You only talk about social justice, poverty, and the poor, and the weak. The only reason you're pointing this out Schaefer in public is because, don't tell the guy that's the reason we vote. We're the opposite. We claim we're voting every time because it's for Israel and for Jews. I have a dear friend, Cheryl, she never knows speaking about her. Cheryl as well. Cheryl is something interesting. Cheryl, who you're supporting, it's Trump against Clinton, who you're supporting. I'm supporting Hillary. Why? She's so pro-Israel. How do you know that? Because I love her and I love Israel, so she's pro-Israel. We're all Cheryl. We all do that. We all decide the candidate we like is good on our issues. Most of us do it backwards, don't we? I've only known 2 elections in my life where I cast a vote because I thought the other candidate was not good for Jews in Israel. I regret one of them. I regret, okay, I'm going to say this on video, I regret voting for Bill Clinton over George or Bush. Okay, and I thought that, okay. So let's continue. So that's big lesson 1. Don't be played. Don't misuse. And now, I'm going to skip one thing, but let's wind this up, take questions. I'm going to end with something very powerful from the Rosh Hashanah, which I think is the second big takeaway from tonight. And it is very much the position of the Orthodoxy. Very much. Don't give up on people. Don't write people off. We're approaching the holiday of Purim. In Purim, there's a minor character in Megillat Esther. His name is Charbona. His name appears twice in the book of Esther. Who is Charbona? What do you do? Come on, audience. Yes, Murray.
He was one of the at the beginning, we talked about all the people that Sparrows consulted. He was one of those people.
I think you're mixing up Charbona with Hatach, but okay. Who's Charbona?
Oh, he's the guy who said, look at the tree over there. Hang him on.
After the king has a Haman face covered with a black cloth, which is in Persia, is a sign of a royal decree of death. Your Majesty, there's a gallows out there 50 amos high. 50 amos high built by an evil Haman was hanging the main dude Mordecai. Frag the Gemara Megillah. How did Charbona know how tall the gallows were? He built the gallows. He was Haman's senior advisor, charged of ethnic cleansing and genocide. He tried to kill every Jew on the planet. He was the alpha of his era. We hate him, don't we? War criminal. How do we answer Shoshana Yaakov? Says Rosh Soloveitchik. We'll take their support at the last moment. You know, we are so opposite. You know, the people in the Jewish community who are furious with AIPAC. How do you give money to Liz Cheney? She's against Trump. The people in the Jewish community on the left who said to AIPAC, how can you give money to Brian Fitzgerald, who's a fantastic Philadelphia Republican you've never heard of, of course, he doesn't make a lot of noise, super good friend of the Jewish community, outspoken opponent of anti-Semitism. A Democrat who refused to support, Republicans refused to support his own party's Republican governor's candidate in Pennsylvania, took no position because he felt they made anti-Semitic statements. We ran TV ads attacking Josh Shapiro for having gone to yeshiva and the kids' yeshiva. He's an elitist. And when Fitzpatrick, the Republican, attacked the Republican candidate for governor, his wife said, we can't be anti-Semites. We love Israel more than most Jews do. But back to this. Fitzgerald got money from AIPAC. There was an outpour. How can you give him money? He supported Trump for president. And that's not. Listen to what the Rav Yasher is going a step further. Charbona is like every Jew on the planet. The last second to save his own stinking skin, Charbona switches sides. Why should Charbona Zachor Tov? We should remember well the lesson of Charbona. We should remember, says Rav Yasher, the lesson of Charbona. We should remember not to be Baidik Sissies. We're a tiny minority, surrounded by many wolves. And if somebody who may have been our opponent and enemy in many ways shows us friendship on any issue at any time, we welcome it and we take it. And the Rav gave it, and his Kamat Nevuah, the Rav gave an example at that time. Two of the most virulent anti-Semites in America were named Jesse Helms and Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson in 1984 referred to New York City as Hamitown, made derogatory remarks about the Holocaust, made vicious comments about Jews. Jesse Helms voted against Casper Weinberger and the Meshumet for the Secretary of Defense. He said a Hebrew should not be trusted with national security matters. Jesse Helms would not vote for any Jew, for any position. Jesse Helms was and I remember the Rav saying, we can get to both of them. Guess what? It's Kamat Nevuah. Because the Christian right got to Jesse Helms, and trips were arranged to Israel for him. And he saw two sides of the story. And You become a member of Hadassah? No. Well, he stopped spouting more extreme anti-Semitic views. At the end of his life, he became a strong supporter of our issues. You haven't heard about Jesse Jackson in the Middle East in 30 years, have you? Think back now. So the day he started supporting Israel, he disappeared from the media. The day he denounced Arafat, the day he came back from a trip to Israel, which a man named David Bedin got to him. Those know David Bedin?
Yeah.
He turned Jesse Jackson around. Jesse Jackson came back, I'll never forget, I was at the President's Conference, he said, you know what a member of Hamas is? So a guy from the PLO calls himself on the day he decides to kill a Jew. He became a supporter of the settlers. He visited Nachum, the mayor there. He came back and said, hey, we're settlers here in America. No, well, there's settlers there too. Jesse Jackson, the media no one gives Jesse Jackson. He intervened with Ayatollah Khomeini on Shabbos. Rav Aaron Soloveitchik sent 2 people, Shluchim, on Shabbos to Jesse Jackson, asked him to call the Ayatollah Khomeini and save Jews from execution. And he did. He made the call, and they weren't executed. He flew to Syria to try to rescue, find what happened to Iran in a good minute, to try to get back the Jewish, so the MIAs. He brought back Zach Baumel's dog tag he got from Assad. He went to Moscow and confronted Gorbachev Soviet Jewry. None of you know about it. None of you know about this. They got no press, right? They got no media. They got no media. Jesse Jackson became a friend and disappeared off the media service, right? Do you remember? We're most of us the same age. You remember when he was every day in the news spouting hatred against us? He became our friend, never heard it. So why am I telling you this? We don't give up on people. Just in the last week, I see 2 flickers of hope. I'm not saying they're going to change, but I think it's going to work. But I think in the spirit of compromise, hope, let's see what happens. After Ilan Omar was thrown over the Foreign Relations Committee, a group of pro-Israel congressmen came to her, had a talk with her, and a resolution was introduced this week. I think it was on Monday, maybe last week, by Josh Gottheimer, who's a very outspoken Jewish congressman from New Jersey, on acknowledging the legitimate right of Israel to be a Jewish state in the Middle East. Ilan Omar is the co-sponsor. Little step in the right, baby steps to start. Marjorie Taylor Greene said some horribly anti-Semitic things. Do you know the forest fires in California are created by the Rothschilds with their space lasers to collect insurance money? Now, come on. Marjorie Taylor Greene was taken to Brooklyn by a group of Jews, right-wing Jews. She met people with numbers in their arms. She apologized for her comments about the Holocaust. Do I think tomorrow Marjorie Taylor Greene is joining the women in green? Do I think tomorrow that Ilan Omar is going to replace her turban with a shaitel? No, I don't. But I must tell you that we have to work with everyone. We live in a malchus shel chesed, we also live in the United States. We have a government, the vast majority of who are our friends and our supporters. And we have to work. If we can't change them, then AIPAC knows what to do next in the election. But let's not write people off. Let's remember, look, this plain as something. And let's not deny it. It's there. Social media magnifies it. The man who attacked the Shul Muncie, I'm very friendly with Chaim Leidish, the Kushner Rebbe, 2 years ago on Hanukkah, his family's Hanukkah, Shul's Hanukkah party. The man was stabbed to death. The guy came with a machete. This guy on his tablet, the police found the front page of that, the full page article of that day's New York Times on attacks and crowd nights against religious Jews. He had Googled nearest synagogue. I went to kill some Jews. There are crazies out there, unstable people out there. There are anti-Semites out there. Social media inflames it. And certainly the fact that Twitter now is taking down restrictions against anti-Semitic things, the fact that on the left, the kind of campuses are aflame with sectionality, I'm not going to lie to you. And by the way, plenty of it comes from here. Plenty of it comes from Jewish sources here, especially the sectionality thing. Jewish voices here. So let's not blame everything on the United States of America. The fact is, Chazli Hashem, we have the support and friendship, unlike Europe, unlike America in the 30s. We never the following story. In the United States in the 1930s, there were quotas in universities. Harvard Law School now admits it to 3 Jewish students a year. Touro, where I teach, now gets an average of 3 students a year into Harvard Law School. Brown University didn't allow Jews in at all. Brown just announced a major expansion, a gift from a donor, because your money's fungible, of several $1 million to expand the area of Providence from little Jewish community on the east side around their university, and they're paying for 2-star cake kitchens. Oh, it's not good enough for them. One middle system, one black kosher relations. So they can get the sheep, they get our Jewish students to go working with Turo. I wouldn't around that come to YU with Turo, but understand. 1/3 of the tenured faculty in American universities are Jewish. They were not our friends on many issues. But it's a fact of life. This is not Europe in the 30s. There's a lot to go on, but the biggest request I make you tonight is don't be played. Don't be fooled. When the right, someone on the right tells you on the side to the left, ask them to call out 1 or 2 on their side. And the other way around as well. It's very nice to be on the left to tell me Joe Rogan's an anti-Semite and Tucker Carlson's an anti-Semite. What I do with their own left-wing people who are, and vice versa. Okay, any questions? First, how many men did not daven Ma'ariv? Do we have 10? What do the hands look like? I don't think we have many yet. Murray, we have many? What do you think?
I got it.
But count it. Murray, put your first count it. Hands up. Who hasn't daven Ma'ariv yet?
With you, I see 7.
So if you'll change the mind, maybe we can.
I stay for the meeting.
What?
That's what I say to make a meeting.
I will daven with a menu of 7, and not everyone will. Well, not everyone will. I am not forcing anyone to accept my family, myself, which is political yes, not politics. Okay, questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. A few years ago, I showed you an autobiography by a Yeki who he was an early Zionist. He was very big in the Jewish agency here. And around 1930, he went back to Germany and visited his family and everything. And he wrote in his autobiography, not later after the war, at the time, he saw that the Jews were in danger and he saw that the Jews did not see it. He said the reason is because the Jewish leaders tend to be older and their friends are older German Gentiles, and those Gentiles are not so anti-Semitic, a little bit. Okay, but he said they don't see that the young people are totally filled with this propaganda, and in a few years, 10, 20 years, those young people are going to be in charge. It's great that there are senators and congressmen now who will vote for safety for our schools, but what will be in 10, 20 years?
I'm optimistic. Because we take these congressmen, we take them on trips, and we work with them, and the fact of the matter is, look, the new Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, is an outspoken. Dov Hikian endorsed him. Dov Hikian is somewhere to the right, if you know, Gleda Tilivan. I think America is not Germany. I think the analogy is flawed. I think we have lots of problems in America, mostly on social media. And certainly, I'm more worried, by the way, with the 2/3 of American kids who are not going to college campuses, who are not being inflamed. And they're being inflamed instead by the stuff on the right. A lot of it, the economic stuff. My nightmare is that the right and left get together and decide that their hatred of Jews transcends the other two issues. That's a concern. So far, we're not getting up the fight so easily. And there's a wonderful younger generation of elected officials there. Yes, sir.
Is there anything that the Jewish community is doing that is causing the anti-Semitism?
Chil Hashem inflames it tremendously. Chil Hashem inflames it tremendously. As Lord Jacobowitz once said, it's not Zatzal. It doesn't say Tilim Mano Maragoyim, it says Lama Yom Maragoyim. Why give a reason? Yes. Very often we say and do things that play into their hands. And there's a double standard. It's in the Torah. We started the speech with it. Senator Moynihan was once saying goodbye to his friend Joe Lieberman. I was with both at the airport, LaGuardia Airport. They were both waiting for the shuttle back to New York, and I was accompanying the senator. And Moynihan said to Lieberman, I made a mistake. I just realized this afternoon I made a mistake in my expense report. I double billed the Senate $508. I'm filing a correction tomorrow. Lieberman said, if I had made that mistake, it'd be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. Moynihan said, you're not that important. Why do you think so? Lieberman laughed at David, you explained it. Yes, a double standard. And General Norman Schwarzkopf once said, the more the monkey is up the tree, the more of its rear end is exposed. The more religious you prov. So Rosh Shlomo Breuer says, Kedoshim to you, The holier you are, the more merciful Hashem. That's why the reporter's not Saul would not take any government money in his kilo. That's why the Samba Rebbe wouldn't take any government money. Those days are gone. And the chants of Chil Hashem, especially the tropes and the stereotypes of Jews and money. That's why these articles in the New York Times are so painful. Okay? Good question. Too close to heart. Any other questions? Yes?
What do you think we can do about the secular Jews in America who are ignorant of really what goes on here, and we want to save them as much as we want to save ourselves?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of good news there.
Is what?
There's some good news there. And CSY runs the Ann Sampson Jerusalem Journey. I have the founding chair in the room with my wife Vivian. How many teenagers does summer company do?
Over 2,000.
Over 2,000 teenagers. Are half of them from secular backgrounds, public schools? What?
A third to...
We're bringing close to 1,000 teenagers with no background. There's a group called Route 1, funded by wonderful Jewish groups, especially Capital One Bank, which is a Sephardic-owned, American-owned bank. And we're giving $3,000 scholarships to every local student that wants to come. Bringing them here. And we're changing them. And we're educating them. You're not going to win over American Jews by telling the Palestinians have no right to exist. You're not going to win over American Jews by talking about Palestinians the way they talk about us. You win over American Jews by explaining to them the root of the problem, the history, and the fact that one side has been willing to share and the other side has been willing to kill. And you win them over. I speak every summer of those programs. And we're not the only one doing it. Other people are doing it too. Birthright has brought, I think it's over 500,000 Jews now this year. And Birthright's had a profound effect on people's attitudes. The answer is, yeah, it's a lot to be done, and we're doing it. And that's where your young gold thing is really helpful, because especially in the Jewish community and in the black community, where a lot of work's been done with young blacks, there's data that suggests that there's progress being made, and it's not going to be Germany in the sense that the older are friends and the younger are not. Fair enough? Your question is not a bad question. It's a very good question. Okay. One more question? Yes?
This morning I noticed on the bottom,
I would have announced the presence of my friend However, I'm acknowledging the presence of all. Yes.
at the bottom, it said about Palestinian killed by Israeli.
Yeah.
And so I read it. You know what it was? This Palestinian was throwing rocks at these people, and so they were defending themselves, but that is not what the picture,
And this is
the
just the
headline
Post.
said.
You
And
mentioned ours,
this
it
is
said-
the Post.
Folks, I live in America and I don't take sides in this journey. Israeli journalists have to tell you that your husband, you're selling your message to the world. Could use some improvement.
Dr. Lucas,
Understatement,
to
millennia. Yes.
to what she said, if I could just very
Okay,
quickly.
Brandon.
Next to Jerusalem Post this morning was, in the bookstore, was the New York Times. And the New York Times had a front page article about somebody in the journalism field bemoaning that journalists have lost credibility. I thought it was ironic. It was on the New York Times. They've lost credibility in the American public.
You know, the New York Times, I'm going to say, the more last part, we're done. Okay, last part. So I mentioned that the Egyptians didn't like the Jews, we were the Jews. But when Yaakov dies, they mourn 70 days for the Jews, the longest mourning in the entire Torah. We gave Moshe Rabbeinu 30 days. They gave 70 days to Yaakov. It was strange Gemara and Sota says, on the Sota, that this, remember Purim was coming, Achashverosh writes a letter to kill the Jews. 70 or 80 days later, he writes a letter not to save it, to save the Jews. The Gemara says it's a nachat ruach. It's a respite. It's a reward for the nations of the world. For the 70 days Egyptians cried for Yaakov. It says around salvation. What's going on here? The Egyptians were a batch of raving hypocrites. The live Jew they couldn't stand. The dead Jew they cried and they wept for. It said so too at the time of Mordecai and Esther. It was a big, read the Malm, big social cause. All the college campuses of Persian media, there were demonstrations, save the Jews, save the whales, save the dolphins, save the Jews. Ir Shushan Salo Samecha. What are the next words? The Jews lived after all. What's reading another cause now? And the New York Times writes, no one writes better and more movingly about the death of Jews in the New York Times. I wish they'd give the same attention to the life of the Jews. Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming, folks. Sorry we don't have Thank you.